Oh, and the week after that weekend you were talking about, the week of the 16th.
So not June 7th and 8th, but June 14th and 15th.
So yeah, so starting on the 5th or the 14th, I'm flying to Germany, and I'll be back at the end of the week.
On the 14th,
because there's no way the only way to do a trip to Germany that makes sense. So, actually, here's my opening bit. I'll talk about that.
On the 14th, there's the next protest, the No Kings protest.
Ooh, well, I don't have to fly. I don't have to be at the airport until like 5 because my flight's at like 6:30.
It's at like 2.
Yeah, my flight's at like 6:30, so I could get to JFK at like 5, and I'll be fine.
You're good. Come to the protest at 2, leave at 3.
Just see it, take a few photos.
Last time it took longer than it took a little while.
Oh, I got a thing I'm working on that I cannot announce publicly related to that I'll tell you about after the show. I talked to someone.
Stop pressing record.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want it to be on a live stream because it's the people I'm talking to are not super public for a reason. Not in a bad way, but in they're afraid of being retributed against. Anyway.
Oh, Saj, I will tell you a similar story.
Ooh.
I possibly allowed myself to be retributed, potentially.
I am still involved.
It's 50-50.
I am still involved in an actual retributed that is ongoing. All right. I'm sure the listener is intrigued. Is anyone watching the stream yet? No one's watching the stream yet because this is what I made this. I got the opening bit to start with.
How many opening bits you got? I'm the one who left my house for once.
Yeah, I leave my house every day.
I leave my house rarely. Only when there's something that's special to do New York wise. And now that it's warm, I will leave my house more often. But yeah, well,
also one thing we're doing is going to a lot more outdoor concerts. It's Monday, May 19th, 2025. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we're talking about capacity planning. So this episode, for anyone, I don't know if anyone even noticed, but like 6 weeks ago, I published this as the stream scheduled. And then something came up and we didn't do the show. And then one thing led to another, and I'd go to do Geek Nights and I'd see this stream and I'd be like, oh, we're not ready to do that yet. And I'd just push it off a couple weeks and I just left it there. So this stream has been pending in the queue of anyone who subscribes to this YouTube channel for like 6 weeks, moving around dates and times. And we're finally doing it. And one person just joined the stream.
Like that. That's kind of fun with the way the YouTube stream scheduling works.
Yeah.
To have it there and then eventually use it. Like it's like that's kind of fun. I like it.
Yeah. Well, especially because if you're watching one and it'll have a countdown and it might just suddenly be like 5, 4, 3, 4 days.
One thing I don't like is that you have to use the YouTube prescribed countdown, and it really doesn't fit for a lot of videos.
Oh no, there's like 4 options, and none of them.
There'll be like a premiere of like a heavy metal music video, and it'll be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's like it doesn't work. You need to let me get.
Yeah, let me make one. I will make one for Geek Nights.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, little piece of advice for all of you out there: if you ever fly to Germany and London at the same time from the United States, because I fly less
than.
Does
it matter what order?
It actually matters a lot what order. So this is me as someone who, before my current job, I flew a lot. Like I circumnavigated the globe on a single trip multiple times in both directions over my life. I've traveled a lot. I've done a lot of flying. And before I worked at this company, a lot of that flying was coach because, I'm human. But now I fly business class, which makes things...
Good night for flying.
I wonder if I can even find a copy of that thing. I'm going to look for it after the show. If any listener even knows what Scott referenced, that's a deep cut.
They should know.
That's the thing of the day from like 2006.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
But Germany is one of the most advanced countries and societies in the world, just for a lot of reasons, I would say, in my personal opinion. However, Frankfurt International Airport sucks for a lot of reasons. It is my 3rd least favorite airport on Earth.
Why
Number
don't you go to the Berlin airport?
because
Or
I'm
the
going to
Daniel one?
Frankfurt because the people I'm meeting are in
Yeah,
Frankfurt.
but the train must take like 5 minutes.
No, it is way faster to fly to Frankfurt, even considering.
Okay.
But Frankfurt Airport sucks for a lot of reasons. Partly because a lot of EU stuff is there, so there's like crazy extra security. But also, it sucks for a good reason because Germany has a lot of worker protection. So if there aren't enough employees, stuff just slows down instead of making people work harder. Like, that's how society should be. So I'm not complaining about the airport, other than noting that this is a thing. The second worst airport in the world is Charles de Gaulle Airport because it's just real. It's like a maze. Like I cannot find my way around that fucking airport, and I consider myself an expert at airports. But the
Stay
worst.
away from here, you foreigners. We'll just insult you when you come to our bakery.
We did just watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail again recently, and I did.
Free on YouTube.
It is, and you know what I confirmed? I know the entire script. Word for word, no exceptions.
It's been long enough. I might not.
But also, that movie still slaps. But the worst airport I have ever interacted with is Mumbai International Airport, only because Mumbai Airport is not that bad on its own. The domestic terminal is also not that bad on its own. They are miles apart, and there's no way to get between them except luck and knowing how to navigate the nation of India. And if you do not have certain like basic skills, you're not going to make it. Like, it is really hard to get between.
Bribes.
More like you've got to know to just like fucking walk out of the airport and like find a tuk-tuk and negotiate a fee and London home. That is like ideal. If you do the exact same trip, but you reverse the order, it adds like 6 hours of bullshit to your trip just because of the combination of time zones and these airports. So my advice to all of you, if you're ever in Europe and you're going to multiple cities and one of those cities is London, end your trip to Europe in London and fly back to the United States from London.
So you're saying you should go to your easternmost place first. And then go
Absolutely.
west until you get back to the, so go far, then come back. Instead
Yep.
of going to the edge, going deep, and then taking the long flight home.
And the other
I
piece
guess
of it,
that also, regardless of any logistical situations, shorter flight home would be nice. You get
shorter
home.
flight home is real nice because then I get my like long flight out of the way, and then I'm tired from the stupid work trip, and I've been away for like 2 weeks, and then it's like a quick flight home. And because of the time zone, I leave at like 5 p.m. and I land at home at like 7 p.m. and it's fantastic. So you said you had some sort of opening bit.
I did. I left my house today. So
Whoa, Scott never leaves the house.
I only leave the house when there's something to do. If I leave the house, if I don't have to leave my house for work, I'll leave the house when there's something good going on.
I'm trying to think of the last time I saw you in person before PAX East.
So I went to the dentist, which I had to do anyway. And I'm like, well,
I'm overdue.
While I'm in this Manhattan, let me take care of my Manhattan business, right? All of it at once. So first, I'm like, well, across the street from the dentist, basically, is the Morgan Library. And I hear their garden that I wanted to see, that they redid, is back open again.
Ooh.
And so I go to the Morgan Library and I check in. It's closed on Mondays. So I'm like, okay.
I mean, a lot of restaurants are closed on Mondays. I can at least say that.
Yep. So then there's this ice cream I learned about. It's anyone who's, I guess, been to Japan or is Japanese probably knows about this, but there's an ice cream sandwich that they make in Japan called monoka, which is basically ice cream in a rectangle trapped in a wafer cookie or all around the edges. And it's a cheap ice cream sandwich you buy at a bodega, right? Or a 7-Eleven or whatever right?
Yep.
But there's a specific one, the Choco Monaka, where the inside of the wafer cookie is coated in chocolate, but additionally, in the center of the ice cream is a thin bar of chocolate.
All right.
So I've been in search of this in the United States, and so I've gone to now 3 Japanese markets, and they have ice cream sandwiches that are monoka, right, from a different brand. It's not the same. It's not the real brand that everyone knows. It's like instead of getting Pocky, getting like Pretz or something, right? And it's still ice cream sandwich inside of wafer cookie, And they have one that is chocolate that is inside the wafer, but they don't have one where it's a chocolate with a thin chocolate bar in the middle.
Nah, that's the advanced technology we don't have here.
So I've been now. I went to like 2 more places in search of this ice cream sandwich, and my guess is that either in New York or in the United States, they're just not distributing that official one, and only this off-brand one is being distributed.
I guess you just got to go to Japan.
I guess I'll have to go to Japan to eat this 50-cent ice cream sandwich.
Might be worth it.
I don't think so. No, it does, you know.
Well, if you do at least a couple other things while you're in Japan.
I mean, you know. So then I've been doing some investigation related to DSs and 3DSs lately. And so I went to 2 places that sell old video game biz, Book Off and another place. Right? And Book Off didn't have a single DS or 3DS console. They had games, did not have a console at all, right? And the other place, which is shady, they had some. They were like $300, and it's like, bro,
whoa!
The Switch 2 is $500. But if you go on eBay, the prices aren't much better. They're between $200 and $300 for 3DSs and new 3DS, which means, not meaning a new 3DS, but like the model of 3DS that came late in its lifetime, which is upgraded, the new 3DS.
Yeah, so for a second I think, I should go find mine and sell mine. But you know what? My DS broke, and my 3DS also broke.
Oh. But yeah, my 3DS works, but it's slightly damaged.
Well, mine works. It's just like the hinge is broken, just like yours, I think, so it's all floppy.
Yeah, mine's flat. So 3DSs are actually hard to come by. If anyone has a 3DS or a new 3DS that you don't want, I would recommend sell it for money.
Mail it to Scott.
Or if you're extremely generous, sell it to me for less than its value. I'm not, because if you're going to charge me what it's worth, I might as well just go. It's not, you're better off getting money from someone anyway.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to the opera, but usually I go to the opera in the fall, right? But this year we noticed when you're looking at the opera schedule that there was a particularly good opera in May. Yeah, it's May, right?
It is May.
So we bought this year, unlike past years, I bought 2 opera tickets. We went in the fall and we're going in 2 weeks.
Ooh, Scott's in both opera seasons now.
Right. So I only own 1 suit. That's all I own, right? There's technically no dress code at the opera. You can show up in whatever you want.
Yeah, if I go to the opera, it's an excuse to wear my best suit and my vest.
It's like you can wear in jeans and a t-shirt. You can wear shorts and I guess you can't wear flip-flops probably. The point is you don't do that.
Yeah.
You just don't.
The opera's where you find the pocket watch that you haven't seen in 5 years and dig out like a pocket kerchief.
So here's the problem. The 1 suit, the only dress clothes I own because I have so few occasions now. Get a little tight because, COVID weight gain times. And besides that, it's all woolly and warm. And it's May and it's warm.
You gotta get one of those like Uniqlo fake jackets.
Maybe. So anyway, I went around to several men's clothing stores, trying different ones, trying to find something that was, light. And I was thinking I would get one of those like linen suits or at least a linen coat.
I used to wear linen garments, and I can share. They are the most comfortable you will ever wear, and they will wrinkle within 2 microseconds of you ironing them.
But every single store I went to, I was like, oh, let me look at the linen stuff. I told the people in the store, I was like, yeah, I don't want to sweat too much. I'm looking at like the linen and I'm like, I need it for the opera. They're like, no, you can't wear linen to the opera.
I mean, you really can't, because linen is what you wear, 1, in the summer. That's a casual outfit, unless you're in Italy. And 2, that goes with a boater hat. You're not wearing a boater hat to the opera.
Not wearing any hat. But anyway, the point is that it's like, well, okay, if I already have a non-linen suit, but that's still too warm. I'm like, are there wool suits, right, normal, or jackets at least, that are lighter? And yes, there are, basically, is the answer. So I eventually found something, but It was just like having the same conversation to different stores, also not knowing anything about fashion brands. And you go into, there was one store I found on Google Maps, and I try to go in, and I'm like, it was like an office building. And
Oh,
I'm
is this the one of those where you need an appointment to have a seeing?
There were some that were appointments. This one was, oh yeah, that's a wholesaler. They're just stuck on Google Maps.
I still remember when I first got my Wall Street job way back, I was like, you know what? I want to get some nice gloves. Like, cause my old leather gloves were like worn out. And I was like, I'm going to get some nice gloves. I'm going to go to the nice place, like in Midtown. I went to like the nicest place I could find. And I walk in and I'm thinking, all right, regular leather gloves are like $60-$70 for like okay ones. So what's a rich person leather glove cost? $300? $400? I walk in and they follow me around like I'm going to like rob the place. They like are really suspicious of me. They won't let me see the gloves at first. And when I finally convince them to like let me go to the glove area and like look at some gloves, they pull one out and they're showing it to me. And then the guy just says, this one is our lowest end, whatever. These gloves cost $5,000.
Yeah, okay.
And I was just like, yeah, I just walked out. I was like, nope, I shouldn't be here.
But no, the other thing is, so you've got the places that are stuck on Google Maps for some reason, but they're wholesale. You got places like you mentioned, appointment only,
Yep.
right, which are on Google Maps anyway. And then you got the normal places,
Yep.
right? And then a place I ended up buying from was showroom only.
Ooh, that's what Bonobos is like.
Yeah, so that's I think that's where I went.
But Bonobos is fantastic. My entire like business wardrobe is. I'm wearing a Bonobos shirt right now.
Because there was like a corner that had like 3 stores. But anyway, but it's like the ones that are showroom only. But no, that wasn't the only one that was showroom only. It's like the convenience factor. It's like, all right, you go in, you can try on. It doesn't even have to be the right color.
Yep.
Right? You just try on the same garments that you're interested in as shape wise. They figure out what size you are and everything, and then you buy it. And they're like, when do you need it by? And I'm like, they're like the person was apologetic. They're like, we don't sell clothes in the store. I'm like, opera's in 2 weeks. They're like, oh, we'll ship it in like 3 to 4 days. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't wait till the last second. But yeah, the other thing is that if it's no good, there's a possibility, right? I could just return it. And because it's 2 weeks away, I got plenty of time, right? So, I could judge it when it arrives. The other thing is that shopping for the clothes in Manhattan, 2 different places asked me, right? One guy's like, where are you from? I'm like, Queens. He's like, where are you from originally? I'm like, Queens. It's like he's like and then meanwhile the other person who came into this, he's like, it must be everyone who shops there must be a tourist of some kind.
Yep.
The next guy who came in the store was like, listen, I'm flying back to London. It must be everyone who shops for clothing in Manhattan is a tourist of some kind.
So what's kind of funny is I don't
know where people from Queens are shopping because there are no stores to sell these things in Astoria. So you're going.
I think there's another factor. I think a lot of people who are wealthier and shopping for clothes in the city moved to the city and did not live here their entire lives.
Possibly, but yeah, it was just like.
But also, I've bought a lot of clothes on trips. In fact, on some of those world circumnavigating trips, I like packed clothes, and then once I was in Asia, I bought more clothes along the way.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I remember someone told me, I forget where I was traveling, but they were like, look, when Americans travel somewhere else, they buy gold.
And
when people from other places travel to America, they buy blue jeans.
Yep. But when I travel, my advice to you, if you're in Asia and you're American, buy clothes. Because if you go to like a Uniqlo in Singapore or like Manila, those comfort jackets I talked about, they look like a normal suit. Like they look fantastic unless you really inspect them or like you're a rich person who really knows the deal. But they're kind of like, they're basically fake. Like they're so light, they're like nothing. Like they're really comfortable. And if you buy them in like Singapore, they're like $20 or $30. But in the U.S., it's not even, they're more expensive. They're both more expensive, and they're always sold out because they don't ship a lot of them over here.
Yeah. But anyway, that gold blue jeans advice I got is really old. The current advice, if you're traveling to the United States and you don't live here, you want to go to the Apple Store.
Yep.
That is what the tariffs might ruin this now, but at least before the tariffs, the Apple Store was the place to go for visitors to the U.S. Just even if you don't use or care about Apple products, like bring a MacBook back to your home country if you don't have Apple stores where
you'll be able to sell it to someone and make a tidy profit.
Yeah, buy an iPhone or two. However much you can get on the plane and through customs.
Well, yes, these are the 10 iPads I brought with me to Germany, or from Germany.
Even with the tariffs, if depending on how crazy they get, it's like if you're going back to a country that does not have Apple products or Apple stores, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. So in the news, this is yet another evil thing that's happening, but it's a technology evil thing that no one's paying attention to because there's a lot of other evil. But this one's a little bit subtle. So if you're not aware, there are not civilian supersonic flights in the United States because
there were for a brief period.
Yep, like 20 years until they banned them. Not even 20 years. There was a whole complicated debate when the Concorde was being developed, and eventually a statute was passed in 1973 to prevent the Concorde from ever flying over the United States. Now, why? Because supersonic jets are fucking loud. They are.
Oh, yeah.
If you have never, I grew up next to Selfridge Air National Guard Base, so I lived under normal flights and supersonic flights. It's not just the sonic booms. Like, if you've never been under a plane that is flying supersonic, it is like an order of magnitude louder than the loudest jet you've ever heard fly over.
Yeah.
So they banned it with good cause. So now 3 piece of shit Republicans are putting forth a bill that is not seeing a lot of controversy because no one understands or cares, that will lift that ban because a bunch of tech companies and billionaires want to travel faster, and there is a new industry rising and developing new supersonic small passenger jets, basically only for the ultra rich. Now,
and they care because they won't be flying over their house while they're in it.
Yep.
So if the poor people's hearing is damaged, who cares?
But so what they claim is that modern supersonic jets are quiet and will not have this problem. And I'm going to, so I'm just going to
1 decibel less than the Concorde. See, it's quieter. It's quieter. I told you.
I'm going to take them at their word and say, sure, I believe you. The reason
Even regular airplanes that aren't supersonic are too loud. If you live just near a regular airport, your hearing will be damaged. Just like if you live near a facility that burns things, you'll probably have asthma and have damaged lungs.
But I'm going to argue, even if this new technology made these planes silent, we should not overturn this law because the amount of CO2 that is emitted per passenger for a super fucking sonic jet is criminal. Like, that is the last thing we should be doing right now. If anything, we should be banning short-haul flights. Like, it should be illegal to fly between Boston and New York City or New York City and D.C. And that's what a lot of countries in Europe are doing.
Yeah, part of the problem is, it's like, you should ban that, right? Because it's like, if you're in Boston, you want to go to New York, take the train or a bus or whatever, right? But let's say you are flying in to the United States, right? And your flight that and you're transferring to, I don't know, fucking Arkansas or some shit.
Yep.
Right? There's no Boston to Arkansas flight, but there's no, but you got into Boston for some reason. It's like, and now you you can't just transfer because you're not going straight to New York and then.
Well, here's my one induced demand. If we had supersonic flights all across the U.S., then people will start flying more and make all these problems worse. The same reason why making roads wider just makes traffic worse. Because places that weren't easily connected will be more connected. But 2, for flights within the United States' boundaries, supersonic flight is not going to save you much time compared to all the hassles of the TSA and getting to and from airports and all that other nonsense.
But it saves people time if you're a billionaire, because when you're a billionaire, a private jet is basically like a car. It waits for you. You get in it within like a couple of minutes. You just get to the airport, you get in it almost immediately, and then it goes where you tell it to go. And it's just like a car that someone drives for you. And so if it's supersonic, then that saves you as a billionaire a lot of time if you have a little tiny supersonic jet.
And a good rule of thumb, oppose any legislation that billionaires want. That helps billionaires no matter what. So you got any news?
Did I have a news?
They got
What
that
was it?
camera.
Oh, right. So Fuji is coming out with this camera in 3 days. So it's not officially announced, but they put up a teaser video for it. And you can see the product page is up on like every major camera online.
Well, the
camera
product
store.
page is just a picture and then a link to that video.
Right. So what this and there's also been a bunch of leaks. So if you go to the rumors sites, you can see what the deal is. And they're doing something that's interesting, and I think we might see more of in other. It's right. I feel like it's worth talking about because you might see it more in other industry segments, right? Not just cameras. Is that this camera, the Fuji X half, is going to have a sensor that is basically in half. So if you hold the camera horizontally, you're taking a vertical photo that's using just half of a right. And so specs wise and technology wise, this camera is, I guess, empirically not good. You could just buy a better camera and rotate it or crop. And
I mean, I just got a
achieve the same
GH7,
result.
and there's even a little diagram in the extensive manual that shows the correct way to hold it for vertical photography.
Right, but even if you don't hold it sideways, you could just change the crop on your camera to take a photo that's the same aspect ratio, or scale it down, or choose JPEG, or choose lower quality, whatever you got to do. You could impose, the camera is this camera that you would buy from Fuji is imposing a creative restriction on you, which hopefully would increase your creativity, because that's a true thing, right? That when you have limitations, you get creative. You could impose that on yourself for free with almost any camera.
Yep.
And so why would you buy this thing? It's like, but at the same time, that's, maybe they could have this be their only camera, and then they're really imposing that restriction on themselves, right? But I could see this happening. You could see you could argue, for example.
Well, think about all the people who, there's not that many people, but who do their document writing on a typewriter just to force that restriction that causes a different way of engaging with media.
But you could consider like the Playdate to handheld game consoles to be a similar kind of product where it's like, yes, we have made an underpowered device for gaming in the year 2023, 4, whenever it came out, I forget. And now it imposes a creative restriction on game developers. Like, hey, make a game that has a crank with only these buttons and this 2-bit black and white screen. That's all you got to work with, right? What can you do? And so it's going to be very interesting to see if anyone buys this.
Yeah, I feel like people will, because if there's anything I've learned in my life, if I want to put a creative restriction on myself, I just do. But I think most people are incapable of that kind of discipline if they want to do something with a restraint. I just don't think people are capable of that generally. But two, what I suspect will happen is the people who will buy this will see other people making media in this form, regardless of how they did it, and will buy this camera to join that art movement if it grows. But they may not understand even that they could just do this with a normal camera. Because I have definitely encountered people who do not realize the generic functionality of things like cameras on their phones.
It's also not confirmed. There were some rumors, we'll find out in 3 days, that this camera will have a mode where you can basically tell it like, hey, I want to shoot a roll of this film, and it will enable that film simulation, which most Fuji cameras have film simulations for various films to sort of mimic the colors that film would have if you used it for real. And you can basically lock yourself into using that film, in quote, digitally, right? And for the next 36 shots or whatever, sort of pretending that you have a roll of film when it's a digital camera. And so that's another kind of thing that this has going on for it. So we'll see. This is all, there have been a few instances of things like this, but not too many. But
it's hit or miss if they take off or not when I'm just thinking about the history of this kind of thing. Yeah,
but we'll see going forward. It's like we've hit a lot of Moore's Law is dead. We've hit a lot of the edge of, how powerful, we can make things, relatively speaking, without just putting tons and tons of electricity into them and setting them on fire like an NVIDIA GPU.
Yep.
So are we going to see more tech companies innovating by going backwards and being like, hey.
Well, there's two ways to innovate by going backwards, and this is a topic for another show because it's something I think about a lot professionally. That one way of doing this is what Fuji is doing, where they're going back in terms of form, but not necessarily truly function because it's an arbitrary limitation. Like they're making this on purpose because they're trying to make a market niche to then sell cameras to people who would not otherwise buy another camera and try to capitalize on a fad. But the other way of going back is to make devices that are underpowered and over-engineered to be more durable, reliable, less energy usage, etc., which would be a good thing for the planet because, like, most people don't need even a camera as fancy as what you and I have. Like, the old GX1 would have been fine for most people who want to learn photography. I had specialized needs, and it's hard to sell those things to a mass market because you won't make as much money from them. The best way to make money is make a new kind of need that has an audience that will buy it, and thus you've sold N cameras to people who never would have bought one before, instead of selling fewer cameras that last longer to a wider group of people.
Yeah, something similar that I enjoy is like somebody goes and will make, like, this hasn't happened enough, I don't think, but like you make a product that no longer exists necessarily, and you do it better than anyone did it when the product did exist, right? So, so turntables, for example, people still make and use those, but it's like if you buy a turntable now, it's better than any turntable ever was, right?
Yep.
A cassette player, you can't really buy. No one is making a cassette playing Walkman these days. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure some like new remakey ones have come out because there is a big cassette subculture.
Imagine if Sony actually tried really hard to make a cassette-playing Walkman right now. They could make the best one ever, significantly better than any past one.
Well, also,
right?
so if any of you out there happen to like vinyl, it's cool and good, but I just want to point out, cassettes have better audio fidelity than the best vinyl.
Yeah.
Cassettes were way underappreciated by people who encountered CDs and didn't understand that early CDs actually kind of sounded worse than cassettes for a bunch of complicated reasons. And the only reason you wouldn't encounter that is if you had shitty cassette players, which most people did.
Listen, these days, it's no one's arguing about fidelity anymore. They want lo-fi on purpose. They say, yeah, it's lo-fi and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, Lo-Fi Beats is one of those popular YouTube music channels on Earth.
That's what that means when they say Lo-Fi Beats.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people realize.
And I'll admit, to this day, the ritual of like getting a vinyl out, like putting it in the thing and like doing, like moving the needle, that's a good feeling.
Yeah. The point is, old on limited on purpose, right?
But anyway, things of the day. Speaking of limited on purpose, to go the other way around, this is a short, like 16-minute, like mini documentary about Lemmings, the game, the video game. But what I didn't know about Lemmings, because I hadn't thought about Lemmings much. I played Lemmings on a PC like
it's
later.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a very high concept game. The later levels of most Lemmingses are not that good because there are too many restrictions and too many fiddly bits. But I digress. Not a review of Lemmings. I didn't quite realize that Lemmings was developed in 1991, and I didn't quite realize the hardware it ran on when it was developed by Psygnosis. Lemmings was kind of revolutionary in that it was kind of a game that was part of the demo scene. Back then, the idea of having 100 sprites operating independently, animated, on a screen on an 8 megahertz computer in the year 1991 was insane. Like, that is something demo scene people of that era were trying to achieve. And when this company developed a way to do it, and you know how they sold Lemmings to like their publisher to like give them the money to actually make the game? They made a tech demo, and all it was 100 Lemmings walking on a screen. And the people who saw it were like, holy fuck, how did you do that? We gotta fund you unlimited money, turn that into a game, holy shit. Mm-hmm. So this video talks about like what the deal was there, and then it goes through all the different Lemmings ports on far superior hardware.
I was gonna say that's what's most impressive is that Lemmings was one of the earliest games to be ported to like every computer that existed almost.
Yep.
Consoles, everything.
Yeah, there was a Game Boy Lemmings.
Oh yeah, there's a Game Boy Lemmings, there's a Commodore Lemmings, there's an Apple II Lemmings.
So the Apple II Lemmings was possibly literally the worst one.
I mean, there's a lot of bad ones.
No,
but
that would
Lemmings-
it is like the video talks about this. The one on the Apple II GS specifically might be one of the worst video game ports in human history.
Okay.
Like it rivals the Pac-Man Atari 2600.
Oh no.
So anyway, what do you got?
So we all know that there's old dudes who love trains, right?
I mean, I'm on the road to be that kind of old dude.
Yeah. But what if there was a person who was way younger than us, who was that kind of train nerd, but not just a train nerd, a total transit nerd who could like tell you what kinds of buses and all this crazy stuff, right? And so this person has had a YouTube channel for a very long time.
I just subscribed.
I just didn't know about it until a couple days ago. It's Miles in Transit. I assume this person's name is Miles. I don't know that for sure. And this particular video was the one that I noticed because it's very subtle what this is about. It's what's the longest trip you can make with a MetroCard. It's not the longest subway trip. The longest subway trip has been done. You go from the Bronx and you go far out to, Queen. It's no big deal,
Yep.
right? It's you. What other things can you ride? Because MetroCard's going away. That's why they did this.
Yep.
Right? What else can you ride with a MetroCard that is not necessarily the subway or the New York City bus? And it turns out there's buses in Westchester that take MetroCard, and there are buses in Long Island that take MetroCard. And so this guy and his friend, they wake up at the crack ass of dawn and they go to Grand Central. Why do they go to Grand Central? Because they got to take the last 1 a.m. drunk train to get out to Westchester.
Ooh, the northbound drunk trains are pretty bad. The the Westchester bound drunk train might be the worst on the Eastern
It was
Seaboard.
basically empty. And then they walk from like Brewster to somewhere else in order to like catch the first bus in the morning at this park and ride, hoping that the bus even shows up.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the stuff they talked about was stuff I already knew, right? Like when they were in Grand Central, they're like, "Hey, you see that dirty brick?" And I'm like, "Yeah, everyone knows about the dirty brick. Everybody knows that." And he's like, "Hey, you see that circle?" And I'm like, "What circle?"
The little hole?
The little hole? Do you know
For the tip of the rocket. I know about that.
the rocket. And in fact, the rocket, the thing is, the tip of the rocket didn't go in the hole. There was a thing hanging from there that held on to the tip of the rocket so that it didn't tip over. Anyway, but they taught, there was a lot of stuff going on in this video. And the best part of the video was A, giving the finger to the Robert Moses statue in Long Island.
Oh, yeah.
And B, they counted all the diners that they saw out the window.
Oh, nice. Oh, I clicked on the video, like literally in a random spot, and they're right at Queensboro Plaza. I can see Silver Cup in the background.
Yeah,
and that old building that's already gone.
When they got there, they said all the Queensboro Plaza facts that we already know, how it was used to connect all the different trains.
Yeah, Queensboro Plaza used to have 8 fucking tracks.
Right, but anyway, the point is, these kids are all right. If this is the future, we're gonna be okay. We just need old people to die.
Yeah, all right, we've gone long on all this viz. This happens when we got other stuff going on. So let's get right into the main bit.
Because the main bit is basically RIM only.
Yeah. So capacity planning from a technology standpoint, you've got hardware, or you've got cloud biz, you've got whatever it is that runs your software, either personally or professionally. And how do you figure out how much of that you need to do the stuff you're going to do with that hardware or that like cloud platform? And that is a question that is actually, in many cases, almost impossible to answer. And a lot of people underestimate how hard it is to answer that question, but also, I would argue, overestimate the value of answering that question too precisely. So when I go way back, when I was first doing IT, I get out of our IT and I'm co-oping at IBM, and then I get it and I'm doing this myself and I'm just kind of winging it. But at one point, my boss was like, "Look, we're buying this software to do a thing. Figure out what kind of server we should run it on, and then buy 2 of them so we can have some backup, like we can have a redundant whatever." And I look at the software, and it has some documentation that says, like, here's the hardware we recommend. And it's like, this is the minimum clock speed. This is the recommended clock speed. Minimum RAM, recommended RAM, how much disk space, how fast the disks are, all that kind of stuff. The same things that a lot of video games will say. And I, being a young fool who had just graduated from college, just went to the IBM catalog and I found servers that were above all the lines that were in that documentation for that software. And I deployed it on the software and everything was fine. Let's fast forward a little bit. I am now the head of product at a software company. I sell software. I personally write the documentation for one of those pieces of software because that's our flagship product. That's my baby. Like, I write the user guide myself. There's a section in that thing about what kind of hardware do you need to run this. And having that job is what I learned. Anytime you see documentation, especially in enterprise software that says minimum requirements, that's just made up nonsense. Made it up.
Video games, at least what I would hope and what I believe, at least, probably not true for every video game, right? But my understanding was that a lot of people would actually sort of either themselves or using a service would run their game on a wide variety of hardware, see what the FPS was, see if it ran properly, and then would say, okay, it's too janky on this. So that's where we'll do
we call that the Kelvin's dad protocol.
Right. And then it's like, okay, we got to 30 FPS. We'll call that recommended. And then.
So that works for video games and for single user software because you can predict reliably like how much that software is going to do. Like a video game, all right, set all the settings, play it. That's how much it's going to use. Like you can measure it and just pick an arbitrary line through trial and error. But with multi-user software, that suddenly becomes a challenge. Well, as soon as it's software that's doing some other kinds of computation, like say some software that's going to take in data, do something at it, archive it, store it somewhere else, make a dashboard, people log in and like interact with data, suddenly that load becomes extremely unpredictable. And it also becomes extremely hard, even for the people who wrote the software, to project in a realistic fashion. Benchmarks are highly synthetic, and most benchmarks still tend to only focus on single user applications or very narrow pipelines. It is almost impossible to like predict the real user load of a complex, especially like hosted piece of software.
Yeah, I mean, at our work, I don't know how those people do it, but there are various customers, and the customers have, basically hardware cloud requirements ranging from like a single instance to like they had to make multiple installations of the software across multiple clusters in some sort of crazy custom setup because it's just that big.
Yep.
And thankfully our software is written in such a way that it's like, if you're going to pay for it, yeah, you can keep adding more and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and it won't be a problem. We haven't found a limit that I know of yet.
So the software...
But the question is, can you predict beforehand how much you're going to need? Based on past experience, kind of, but I think mostly you just sort of have to put up a size, then start using it and see if it falls over and see if you got to make it and adjust it until it's until it's working.
Well, like that software I used to sell, the one that it was like a monitoring and alerting thing for like capital markets stuff. I'm being vague here for a reason, but that software, we had the team develop better guidance for customers. Was one, we used the software ourselves, so we knew a lot about how it operated just because we used it as it was intended, just like we're a customer, which is the best way in general to just like learn about software is to use it.
Yeah, we also they call it dog fooding, right?
Oh, we also call it dog fooding at both my current company and my previous company.
That's not what you call it. That's the industry term. But
yeah.
The point is, we do that too, but there's no way that we could have the amount of data that our customers have. Our customers might be like, the biggest companies of the world that you've heard their names before. And so the amount of data that they have is just so absolutely enormous that even if we use our own software ourselves, we don't have that scale and we don't have the money to pay for that anyway.
Yeah.
Right? And so we can't completely simulate the customer situation when the customer is that big and so much bigger than we are.
Yep. So what we used to do, and now this was easier back then because it was mostly hardware. So like we reference hardware. It's not like cloud stuff, which is a whole different ballgame. So
This is all cloud stuff in my work. Yeah.
Yep. So what we ended up doing that worked pretty well is we'd have some reference hardware, and we kept like 4 servers that were our reference boxes. And every now and then we always left the oldest, slowest one there. So we'd always have data from like that one. But every now and then we'd take whatever the highest one was and we'd get better hardware, and then we'd retire just one of the other ones in the middle if we needed to, because we didn't want to run a million of these things. And we would basically we built test harnesses that took the same stuff we were using, basically multiplied the amount of stuff that was happening by 10 and had a bunch of user simulators, and we'd run the same test harness on the hardware to determine some guidance as to, here is the amount of work this reference hardware would handle. And that was what we would tell clients. Like, if you had a server that was this server, right down to the model number with this much RAM and this many hard drives and whatever, then it'll handle 40,000 messages per second across up to 10,000 connections, like something like that. Like, that is what we'll stand by. And it worked pretty well. The interesting thing I found is that with cloud, many of the times when I interact with people, it's not that the software actually fails. It's that they can't control the costs of the cloud infrastructure they're running it on, because it'll just scale. And that is the fundamental problem of the modern era that did not exist when I was doing this a decade ago, at least not to the scale it does now.
Because it's like, oh yeah, you can just keep going bigger, and your stuff will never fall over. Your money will fall over.
Yep. And it's very telling that all these cloud providers, it's really, if you think it's hard to predict how hardware will behave, it is like a capital H hard problem to predict what your Amazon bill will be.
Oh, yeah.
And the billing structure, I think, this personal opinion, not professional opinion, of cloud providers, not necessarily calling out any particular one, is obfuscated for 2 reasons. I think, 1, you can make a lot of money by making it obfuscated. But I think, 2, they can't predict it that well either. I really believe that.
I think that they price each service, right, individually when you're a big cloud provider.
Yep.
And they're pricing each service based on what it costs them, what the competition is, et cetera, right? And so that's why you'll see some things and then there's other things that go into it too, right? Like, if the Cloudflare guy, Cloudflare's got a lot of problems, but you sort of sometimes have to use them anyway.
Yep.
But there's a lot of articles about why they have their free tier and the benefit it gets them, and why their free tier destroys everyone else's free tier by comparison. And it's like there's a sound business logic to it, right? The problem is you have all these services that are priced individually on really finely grained stuff, right? Like you're charged based on individual requests, or bytes outgoing versus incoming, and the different tiers, and how much down to the milliseconds, how long your server is up, when it's stopped, you're getting paid, but if it's terminated, you're not paying. All these little details, and some things you turn on cost you nothing, but other things actually require them to dedicate resources to you, so they charge you for that. And so when you have just so many things, to actually go down the invoice of every single thing and then verify each of those items, they might just say, yeah, you made 5 billion requests and therefore it costs you $1. It's like, did I? Is there a log of the requests? It's like, oh, you want to store a log of the requests? Well, that's going to cost you.
15 plus years of being in capital markets, big companies sometimes will sue each other about, you meter me by this complicated rubric. Prove to me I did all the things you said I did. And a lot of companies can't prove it.
I think I'm confident that the major cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Cloudflare, maybe not Oracle or Linode, Azure, Google, Amazon, I'm confident that if you actually challenge them, you would fail, right?
Yeah. Well, but I would argue, I don't think you'd fail because they can't prove it to mathematical certainty. I think you would fail because they have good lawyers and a lot of data that will corroborate them enough.
I think that,
and they're probably not cheating. I don't think any of them are cheating.
Yes, in my experience, they are metering their services in good faith.
Yep. But practically, I think the only way to do this now, especially as we're moving into cloud infrastructure, like I could talk a lot about how I used to do this and like running servers, but nowadays you kind of just have to run your things and keep track of, let's get into the old SLI, SLA, SLO. You got to have SLOs and you've got to keep track of, is my thing performing well enough? And how far away is it from not performing well enough by whatever my definition of well enough is? Like, that is the thing you have to do. A lot of companies, a lot of people don't think about it that way, especially gamer nerds who will look at a computer and be like, I'm only getting 300 FPS in Quake 1. If I turn everything down, I gotta get that to 450 or my computer's suboptimal. Like, that extra capacity doesn't buy you anything. So you got to look at, is it doing what it needs to do? What's my system load? Like, can I look at all those metrics you can pull if you look at a computer or look at a server and just figure out, is there a bottleneck you're approaching where things might stop working? And then you separately just have to look at, what does all this cost us? And you just have to look at that month by month, quarter by quarter, year by year. And you have to have a sort of data-driven approach of, here is the history of our performance. Here's the history of what we're paying. Is that okay? And are these lines sloped reasonably, or do we need to do something different? And I think you will drive yourself insane trying to be too empirical about it, because other than very simple or very scientific or very narrow use cases, you're not going to be able to do a calculation that mirrors the real world, in my opinion.
I was about to say, because you were talking about the gaming, right? It's like, if you're going above 60 hertz, you're good. But no, LG did just release that monitor that is an OLED, which has 480 hertz refresh rate. So any game running less than 480 FPS is suboptimal.
I got to upgrade my computer because this 4080 is not going to get me 480 FPS in Overwatch.
If somebody can tell the difference with their eyeballs between the 480 FPS and the 144, it's like
I would buy, I have these Dell Ultra Sharps I'm not going to replace until they break. They only run at 60. So I run all my games at 60, and I'm sure, I bet there's some people out there who in a blind study, well, I guess blind in the scientific way, otherwise this wouldn't make sense. They could tell the difference between 60 FPS and say 120 FPS, maybe even up to 144 FPS, because that's kind of the upper limit where VR ceases to get meaningful returns. And VR has way stricter requirements for humans not noticing for a lot of reasons we can't get into. But 480, that's beyond the realm of sanity for a human eyeball.
Yeah.
And we've gone almost an hour, so we could just stop right there. I think that was a good enough excuse to do a long show.